Do you remember the last time you hung out with your best friend from high school before everything changed? Because I think that's what Superbad is secretly all about. Not McLovin, not the parties, not the chaos. It's about two best friends before life pulls them apart. And nobody really talks about that. Welcome to Cinemastalgia, where we talk about the movies that never really left us. Today, a film about the last night two best friends spent pretending they weren't already saying goodbye. This is Superbad. August 17, 2007. That's when Superbad hit theaters. And if you were a certain age that summer, 15, 16, 17, you probably remember exactly where you saw it, who you were with, how loud the theater was. Because that's the thing about Superbad. It didn't just make people laugh, it made people feel seen in a way that most comedies, most movies really, never pull off. On the surface, it looks like every other high school comedy. Two awkward guys, one wild night, an ID with someone else's name on it. And yeah, it's filthy and it's chaotic, but it's also one of the funniest scripts ever written. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg started writing it when they were only 13 years old. 13. They named the main characters after themselves. The whole thing is basically a love letter to the most embarrassing years of their lives. But here's what nobody tells you going in. Underneath all of that, underneath every joke, every disaster, every McLovin moment, there's a much quieter story happening. And it's the story about two best friends who are 3 weeks away from going to different colleges, who have never spent a significant amount of time apart, and they cannot bring themselves to talk about it. Judd Apatow, who produced the film, said it plainly. The movie is about the panic of starting a new phase of your life without your best friend. That's it. That's the whole thing. And what makes Superbad special, what makes it last, is that it understands something really true about being that age. You don't process endings when they're happening. You get loud instead. You make plans. You chase something. You do anything to avoid sitting still long enough to feel what's actually coming. That's Seth and Evan running all night toward a party they barely make it to, away from a conversation they never quite have. The movie opens with Seth picking up Evan for school. They're on the phone before he even pulls into the driveway. And from that first shot, these two kids doing their morning routine like they've done 1,000 times, you already understand everything about who they are to each other. They don't have to perform for one another. They just exist together, comfortable in a way that takes years to build and almost no time at all to lose. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg started writing the script when they were 13 after watching a movie they didn't think was very good and deciding they could do better. They named the characters after themselves. The panic Seth feels about Evan leaving for a different college, that wasn't invented. That was remembered. The script sat with them for over a decade. They rewrote it through high school, through Rogen moving to Hollywood, through early TV gigs on Freaks and Geeks and Undeclared. They wrote from different cities, by phone. The separation anxiety in the film is real because they lived a version of it while writing it. And that is what gives Superbad its texture. It doesn't feel written, it feels remembered. Every awkward pause, every misread social situation, every moment where Seth says exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. That's not a joke constructed in a writer's room. That's two guys in their late 20s reaching back into who they were at 17 and pulling out something true. The comedy is a vehicle. The friendship is the destination. And the movie shows that from the very first frame. There's a moment in the film where Fogel accidentally lets it slip. Evan is going to be his roommate at college. Seth didn't know. He finds out in the middle of the street, in the middle of the worst night of his life, and his face crumbles. Not in a big dramatic way, just quietly. Like something he'd been refusing to believe just became real. That moment doesn't exist in the original draft of the script. It was added later, and the person who pushed for it was Judd Apatow. By 2007, Apatow was the most important producer in Hollywood comedies. The 40-Year-Old Virgin had come out 2 years earlier and completely reset what an R-rated comedy could be. Raunchy on the surface and genuinely emotional underneath. Knocked Up hit the same summer as Superbad and proved it wasn't a fluke. There was a whole new template in play. Crude humor as a delivery system for something real. And Apatow applied that template to Superbad with one very specific note. He kept telling Rogen and Goldberg that the script was funny. It had always been funny, but it needed more. It needed a reason to care beyond the laughs. His exact words about the film became, "It's about friendship and the panic of starting a new phase of your life without your best friend." That's a producer giving the film its soul. Not the jokes, but its soul. The chaos of the night, the cops, the party. All of that is the scaffolding. What Apatow understood, and what he kept pulling Rogen and Goldberg back toward, is that none of it matters unless you're terrified of losing someone. Seth is terrified. He just can't say it. So he gets loud instead. He makes a plan. He chases a party. And the whole movie watches him run. Fogel walks into that liquor store alone. A skinny kid, a Caesar haircut, a collared shirt buttoned all the way up. He slides the ID across the counter. One name, McLovin. The cashier looks at it, looks at him, and somehow it works. Christopher Mintz-Plasse was only 17 years old when he filmed that scene. He had never been in a movie. He didn't even have a headshot, so he took one on his flip phone. Casting director Allison Jones had wallpapered Southern California high schools with casting notices because every professional actor they brought in was wrong for the role. Too self-aware, too polished. He walked into the audition and improvised insults at Jonah Hill, who was already cast, who took it personally, who immediately told Apatow he did not want to work with this kid. And Apatow's response? That's exactly why we're hiring him. Because McLovin is the only character in the film who isn't afraid. Seth is afraid of losing Evan. Evan is afraid of stepping outside of Seth's shadow. But Fogel, McLovin, walks through the entire night like he's starring in his own movie. Because in his head, he is. He picked a one-word name and built an identity around it and committed completely. And the world, impossibly, went along with it. He went back and finished his senior year while the film was already leaking online. He started getting recognized. He told an interviewer, "One day I was a nobody. And then 2 days after the movie came out, it was everywhere. 0 to 100. And he was barely out of high school." On the film's 15th anniversary, he posted one sentence. "My life has never been the same. And can you stop screaming McLovin at me?" There's a detail in the film that nobody really talks about. The boys have cell phones. They use them to call each other, and that's basically it. There's no texting their way out of a bad situation. No GPS when they end up on the wrong side of town. No group chat. No Instagram story of the party. Whatever happens that night exists only in the memory of the people who were there. That's not a stylistic choice. That's just what 2007 looked like. Here's the thing that stops me every time I think about it. The first iPhone went on sale June 29, 2007. Superbad opened August 17th, 2007, less than 7 weeks apart. The film that would come to define a generation of teenagers landed in theaters at the exact moment the device that would redefine teenage life forever was sitting on shelves at the Apple Store. The kids in Superbad don't have one, and they never will. The version of high school this film lives in: house parties with no documentation, nights that can't be live streamed, phone calls that drop. That world was already ending when the movie came out. Within 2 or 3 years, it would be gone entirely. So when millennials watch Superbad now, there's a second layer of grief underneath the obvious one. It's not just Seth losing Evan. It's the loss of a whole way of being young. A time when a bad night was just a bad night. When embarrassing moments didn't follow you. When you could be whoever you wanted on a Friday, and nobody had receipts by Saturday morning. The film preserved that world without even trying to. It was just trying to make a comedy about some kids in the suburbs, and it accidentally made a document of the last summer before everything changed. Jules doesn't drink. That's the detail the whole movie hides in plain sight. She throws a party. She invites Seth. She is genuinely excited to see him. And she doesn't touch a single drink all night. The entire mission, the liquor store, the chaos, all of the disaster that almost derailed everything. All of it was to impress a girl who was already impressed. Seth spent the whole night trying to earn something that he already had. Emma Stone was 18 when she filmed that role. It was her first movie. She had moved to Los Angeles at 15, spent years going on auditions that led nowhere, and it hit a stretch where her agent basically stopped sending her out entirely. Then, Superbad. On set, the whole production ran loose. Long takes, improvised lines. Apatow's style of letting scenes breathe and find themselves. Stone thought that was just how movies worked. She told an interviewer years later that she walked off that set genuinely believing every film would feel like that, and that it took her a while to realize how rare it was. What she brought to Jules is something the script alone couldn't guarantee. She makes Jules warm without making her a pushover, patient without making her passive. When Seth drunkenly tells her she wouldn't have kissed him sober, Jules doesn't get angry. She just looks at him. And that look says everything the film has been building toward. That his whole framework for how this night was supposed to go was wrong from the start. The joke is on Seth, but the film is kind about it. Because the point isn't that he failed. The point is that he was so convinced he wasn't enough that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. Which, if you think about it, is exactly what's happening with Evan too. Seth is right there. He's always been right there. But Evan can't figure out how to say it either. The night is over. The party is gone. Seth and Evan are in Evan's basement, side by side in sleeping bags. Half-eaten pizza bagels on the floor. The lights are low. The score is quiet. And for the first time in the entire film, there is nowhere to be and nothing to chase. And that's when it finally happens. They talk. They really talk. Evan admits he only agreed to room with Fogel because he was scared of living with a stranger, not because he was trying to replace Seth. And Seth admits that he knew about the rooming arrangement weeks ago. He found it in Evan's papers and said nothing. They clear the air on everything they've been carrying all night. And then Seth says it, quietly, a little drunk, looking at the ceiling. I love you, man. Evan says it back. And then, in a beat Jonah Hill improvised on the day, Seth gently reaches over and boops Evan on the nose. Soft, stupid, completely sincere. And then the boys fall asleep. That scene was written right before production started. It didn't exist in earlier drafts. Apatow read the script and said something was missing. One more emotional beat before the morning. So Rogen and Goldberg went off and wrote The Basement. And what they wrote, almost accidentally, was one of the most honest depictions of male friendship in an American comedy. Because in 2007, and honestly for a long time before and after, two guys saying I love you to each other on screen without it being a punchline was genuinely rare. The film doesn't treat it as a joke. It doesn't immediately undercut it. It just lets it be true. Two kids that have been best friends for their whole lives, finally saying what they're feeling. It's the scene the whole movie was always building towards. Not the party, not the girls, this. Two sleeping bags on a cold basement floor, and the only honest conversation of the entire night. The next morning, they go to the mall. That's it. That's the whole ending. Just two kids walking through a shopping mall the morning after the worst and best night of their lives, running into the girls they'd done everything to impress and figuring out what comes next. And then they go to the escalators. Seth goes one way with Jules, and Evan goes another with Becca. The mall swallows them in opposite directions, and just before the floor takes them, just before they're too far apart to see each other clearly, they both turn around at the same time. It lasts maybe 2 seconds. The script describes it simply. They look as though they're never going to see each other again, and then they're gone. Greg Mottola didn't oversell it. No swelling music, no slow motion, no close-up that holds too long. Just two kids on escalators, a small wave and a cut. And somehow, that restraint is what makes it devastating, because the film trusts you to feel it without being told to. One critic wrote that final shot is about losing a best friend, but also about losing a way of being that always made you feel safe. It's not just Evan that Seth is losing. It's the version of himself that only exists when Evan is around. The one who is loud and dumb and completely himself because there's someone nearby who has always loved him anyway. That's what high school friendships are at their best. Not just people you spend time with, a version of yourself that exists only in the presence of one specific other person. And when that person leaves, even if they're only going to Dartmouth, even if you'll see them at Thanksgiving, something goes with them that you'll never fully get back. Superbad knows that. It has always known that. The wave goodbye is the whole movie. Here's what I keep coming back to. Seth and Evan don't lose each other. That's not what the movie's about. They're going to see each other in a few weeks. They'll probably talk on the phone. Life goes on. But the specific version of their friendship, the one that exists when you're 17 and inseparable, and the whole world is just the two of you figuring it out together, that version ends. And no amount of phone calls brings it back exactly the way it was. That's the grief Superbad is sitting with. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks up on you in a mall on a Saturday morning when you turn around on an escalator and realize the person going the other direction is already becoming someone you used to know. Most movies don't trust their audience with that feeling. They wrap it up. They give you the big moment, the resolution, the send-off. Superbad just gives you a wave, and then it ends. Because that's how it actually goes. There's never a perfect goodbye. There's just a moment and then it's over, and you carry that with you. If there's someone in your life who knew you before you became whoever you are right now, reach out to them. Not because the movie tells you to, but because that wave happens faster than you think, and the escalator doesn't stop for anyone. Please like and subscribe, and let us know which film you would like to hear a breakdown of next.